Well, one day we were walking past. I was with a middle school group, and I said, this is someone's child. This is someone who could have been our next president, could have been our next corporate CFO, CEO. I mean, someone to bring in employment, someone great. Let's stop and just literally look at this. And we documented it. And that was my first encounter with actually looking at one. And I noticed a lot of work was put into it, a lot of work. Now, since I've done this several times, I know it was more work than I originally thought, because some of these monuments climbed more than 8 feet. And they literally had things that documented the life of the person whose life was lost. They would have jackets, they would have teddy bears, they would have words of encouragement for the community, words to encourage the family that had lost a family member. It was a lot of information in one of the Dow projects, that the first one I've seen. And so I said, you know what, every time I see one, I'm gonna take a photograph. And that's what took off. I didn't realize there were so many, because I guess I had passed them. And I feel I see everything. I walk in the community. I walk in several communities with students, with myself, just to document. And I had evidently been passing them. So it became a normal landscape. It was a part of our landscape. And people were passing them, not really recognizing them. So I said, the person who put this up went through a lot of painstaking, I mean, they are grieving. They're grieving over a loss of a loved one. And they're publicly expressing that grief. And we should recognize it. We should know what it is, that it is an expression of love for a loss. No matter what the person did in their life, someone loved them enough to publicly express that. And that's what motivated me to document it. When I was in Chicago, and in the summer, Chicago had an enormous amount of killings and accidents and other types of incidents where these monuments were popping up. I was talking to a young lady with her sister on a porch, and they were right in front of a monument. And I get emotional about this, so you might, because these are stories of life. And what happened, the lady said, this child had passed her way for 17 years. And she never said anything to him. She said he was a good kid, and she regrets that she did not speak to him one time, because she thinks she could have influenced him to take another direction by just not hanging with the group of people that he was hanging with. And she said, I'm going back to my church, and we're going to start a youth program. If it takes 3 women walking the community and talking to young people, that's what it's going to take. If it takes 20 of us, if it takes 30 of us, we're going to do it. And those are the stories that have had the opportunity of receiving, because all of these activities that I've been participating in, I feel blessed to be amongst the people to hear their stories. And when I talk to people who have lost persons in their family and friends, and they talk about the monuments, and they talk about the people that has gone on, what their lives are like, I think they just want to express their grief to a community at large. They want to let people know who that person was, so that legacy lives on. And I had a lady in Delaware, and I was passing her, and I could tell she was bending down, and I said, it looked like she had a flower in her hand. And I told my sister, I think she's put up a monument. So we swung back around, and I said, ma'am, I'm not here to scare you. My name is Lois Ingrum. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. can I take a photograph of this monument you've put here? She said, what? And she said that she said, I've only been there for 30 seconds. How did you see me? She had put the monument up the day before, but there was grass growing up, and she wanted to cut it down, and she didn't have scissors. And she came back the next day to cut some of the grass around where her father had passed away. He was in a car accident, and she was his only daughter. And she said, I thank you. She said, because I thought I was the only one living this, and that no one would ever know. And she said, you're from St. Louis, Missouri. His name would continue to go. It'd be a legacy in a project. She said, I want to come to the project. So it was things like that, and talking to folks about their kids and the family member that's no longer with us. In Detroit, there was a young man who went into a confectionery, and an older guy, and the guys who told me were gang members. So they were walking in the street when I went to the monument, and they kind of walked up on me, and but I could tell that they weren't old enough for me to be too, afraid. So I just stood my ground and asked them, do they know, what the story was? And they gave me plenty. They didn't give me their name. They wouldn't write anything, but they gave me plenty, and they wouldn't let me video. But they told me the young man walked into the confectionery, and they said, it was an adult. So when they said that, they separated themselves from being adults. They were maybe 17 or so. They say it was an adult male. And he told the young man, who are you looking at? And then he pulled out a gun and shot him. This young man had no gang connections, no connection in the streets at all. He was a student from 2 blocks away that was just coming in after school to get some junk food. And so after he was killed, there was more than 100 motorcycles that helped. There was hundreds of people in the streets. The actual monument is more than 8 feet tall. It has been there for 2 years, so people come in and add things to it. But it was more than 300 people total in this celebration of his life. The city pretty much helped with that celebration because it was a misunderstanding on the part of the person. He thought the young man was gang-related and was going to get the jump on him or something, and he shot him for no reason. Most of these, I don't know the people, or I know them now. They stay connected to me, but initially I would not have had any connection with them. My mother passed away, and I think this whole project is her wrap of a monument. My mother was killed in 1988, and because she was killed, my family was never really able to grieve because we were going through a court system. It was a homicide, and you couldn't talk. You couldn't until trial time. Then you had to go to depositions, and you only told the story that you could tell. You couldn't tell everyone. You had to kind of wait till the trial, and it didn't go to trial for 2 years, and then the trial lasted 2 years. So there was 4 years of not really grieving her death. Our family really never had an open expression of grief. We were just kind of numb through the whole thing. And I think this is my way of grieving and understanding where everyone else is in their grieving process. And that it is, you never forget. You never forget, and you don't want other people to forget. And that's why I think there is a public openness to this. I think people want other people to know this person, and it's like a legacy for them to keep that name alive as long as they can. And so, this whole project to me is in remembrance of her, because I was unable to grieve.